John Heartfield was one of the most prolific Dadaist artists who pioneered the medium of photomontage, creating visceral political satire. Born Helmut Herzfeld in 1891 in Berlin, Germany, to a socialist poet, dramatist, and prose writer, he was the eldest son of 4 children. At the age of 7 in 1898, he and his siblings were abandoned by their parents and were taken in by the village burgomaster and his wife. In his teen years, he apprenticed under a bookseller, then a painter, eventually making his way to the School of Applied Arts in Munich, where he studied under Maximilian Daiso, Julius Dietz, and Robert Ingles. In 1913, he moved back to Berlin and began his studies at Arts and Crafts School in Berlin, where he studied alongside Ernst Neumann. 2 years later, in 1915, he was drafted into the German infantry to fight in World War I, but was able to avoid service by claiming insanity. He then met George Grosz, someone who he would claim is the only artist that mattered, and subsequently destroyed all of his own art up to that point. With the war raging and anti-British sentiment on the rise, and as a form of protest, this is when he decided to Anglicize his name from Helmut Herzfeld to John Heartfield, a name that would stick with him until this day. Heartfield would pioneer photomontage with Grosz in 1916. Then, a year later in 1917, Heartfield would join the Berlin Dada Club, becoming a key figurehead, marking the beginning of his career producing scathing political satire art. The zenith of his career, the interwar period, was when Dadaism truly took shape as anti-art and a way to combat the growing Nazi influence and corrupt bourgeoisie. He joined Eyes, Workers' Illustrated magazine or journal, in 1929 to more easily spread his art to the masses. By the time that the Nazi Party took power in 1933, his name was number 5 on the Gestapo's most wanted list. When they raided his house, he narrowly escaped through a window and by hiding in a trash can. Heartfield would flee to Prague, then to London in 1939. He would continue to produce book jackets and illustrations while in exile there. Heartfield returned to Berlin 17 years later, post-war, in 1956. When he would be awarded a medal as a fighter against fascism in 1958. Heartfield would then live a busy life traveling around Europe and continuing to attend exhibitions until he died in April 1968. He lived through 2 imperialistic wars and already knew before the first one had gone on very long the enemy was in his own land. With the boldness of the mouse who defies the elephant, he challenged militarism and assumed an English name in defiance to chauvinists. Heartfield lived in Germany during a time of economic depression and food shortages due to the Great War. Then he lived through the interwar year with a heavy war reparations and economic collapse of the 1920s. After experiencing the living conditions of the working class, Heartfield had the perfect fuel for his rebellion. The spark being idealism found in communism at the beginning of the Russian Revolution. He made it his mission to convey the hardships and failings of the Weimar era and the German Republic. In May of 1912, at 21 years of age, John Heartfield held an exhibition on the walls of Berlin Trade Union office. The walls were covered in photos of mutilated hands of woodworkers, depicting the horrible workplace accidents they had endured. The photos highlighted the unsafe work conditions and much overlooked industrial violence, depicting a visceral testimony to those in command. Exhibitions, by extension, demanding improvement from the laissez-faire labor practices, hoping the images would arouse the indifferent into action. Heartfield would continue to photograph people of the working class, including the tight living spaces they had to endure, all with the hopes of persuading those who would normally look away to face the conditions they let continue with their inaction. However, unlike the images of the mutilated hands, these photographs wouldn't be striking enough for John Heartfield's goal. He needed something better, something with a bit more shock value. This came in an unexpected way. Unbeknownst to him and his friends, they would find inspiration from the soldiers in the First World War who would cut and paste images together in order to get the reports of butchery back home past the mail censorship. The final piece of the puzzle in developing his style would be the collage-like techniques of Cubism, the approach of fragmented objects and coming together to create a new abstract reality. With the creation of photomontage in 1916, John Heartfield would have a weapon in which he would use to combat the interwar years' rise of fascism. After World War I, Germany faced terrible economic conditions. Heavy war reparations were compounded by the depressions of the 20s, leaving the next generation of Germans hungry and resentful of the French and English. It is in this environment that fascism began to rise, but so did Dadaism. Heartfield joined Berlin's Dada Club. He met others who disagreed with the way Germany was headed. With this new medium of art and new art form based on chaotic use of commonality, John Heartfield and the Dadists agreed they needed to attack and disrupt the corrupt and powerful. They believed that since art was a part of corrupt bourgeoisie culture, that their art was or needed to be the opposite. It was anti-art. John Heartfield's anti-art increased in its aggressive political nature, purposely trying to agitate the viewer. It would only mature as he honed his skills in typography, photomontage, as the years would go on. Heartfield utilized photomontage for the purpose of bitter social protest and political propaganda. Armed with his knowledge from working in advertising, Heartfield became a revolutionist, creating with care pictorial speeches easy to comprehend, with no need for interpretation. Using illusion and juxtaposition to create contrasting visuals able to both represent humor, depriving his subject of any power, and the social repression that threatens Germany. In this photo montage, Heartfield emphasizes the juxtaposition of Hitler's falsities. By superimposing the chest X-ray over a photograph, Heartfield forces the revealing of Hitler's ribs or the inner machinations, a humanizing of the Nazi Party leader, while forcing the viewer to confront the consumption of materials, tin, with no improvement for the working class. Heartfield uses Henry Bergson's comedic idea of isolating the rigidity of human form and imbuing it with ideological critique, using Hitler's tendencies for repetition in actions and speeches to deliberately emphasize the disparity between himself and the working class. In Millions Back Me, Little Man Asks for Great Gifts, Heartfield humiliates Hitler and exposes his puppet-like status. The larger figure on the left, towering over Hitler, who looks like a toy, hands him money notes. Heartfield poses Hitler in one of his many salutes, but specifically chooses one where he looks as though he's accepting the money from the larger figure behind him. An allusion to the rich industrials who backed Hitler financially, and where in support of fascist and capitalist society, that it is those who are rich that will prosper from Hitler's rule, not the Commonwealth. Heartfield mastered figurative language with the title Millions Back Me, creating a pictorial idiom in hope that the masses implicitly understand the political reality of the Nazi Party. As restrictions under the Nazis grew, education became limited to what was deemed allowed, and many were left without the ability to fully understand or realize what was propaganda and what was truth. So John Heartfield felt as though he had a part in educating the masses and hoped that they would be consciously emancipated. In the above piece, a figure sits, its head mummified in newspapers, unable to see or speak. Around its chest is bound in an electrocution harness. In the bottom right corner, the figure asks, "Am I a cabbage head? Do you know my leaves?" This caption references a patriotic song from the 1830s, which celebrated the undying loyalty to the Kingdom of Prussia. Here it is referenced, blind devotion to the National Socialist German Workers' Democratic Party, Nazi Party. It was also alluding to how propaganda was seeping into the news, and that if you blindly trust all that you read, you will become blind to the wrongs the bourgeoisie have committed against the working class, that their own choice to stay blind to the truth will be their death, highlighted by the fact that even though the figure who had become blind, deaf, and mute still ended up in the electric chair. John Heartfield's pieces all offer a cautionary tale and a request to not be implicit in the failings of their country, to question what the press tells you, to emancipate your consciousness and think for yourself. 5 years later, after Hitler has consolidated his power as chancellor, the Nazis' actions grew bolder and bolder. Hermann Göring, a military leader, even being bold enough to say, "Ore has always made an empire strong, but butter and lard have made a country fat at most." In response, John Heartfield visually creates a Göring's quote. In it, a family sits down to eat, but there is no food. All that is left is iron items. They are surrounded by Nazi symbols, and the swastika covering the walls as a picture of Hitler watches all over them as they all, including the baby and the dog, eat. Not only is the piece highlighting the absurdity and the disparaging distance between common man and those in power, but also the lies that Hitler had made, when in fact he had promised bread and an end to the food scarcity. Many voted for the Nazi Party due to the hate for the Allied forces and the fact that the war reparations made food scarce and difficult to buy. This piece unknowingly would predict food scarcity during the Second World War, many people not even having butter to spread on their toast. John Heartfield was a meticulous artist who sought to achieve purpose with each piece. When an idea struck, Heartfield would do all in his power to produce it exactly as he imagined. Once spending 2 days with his longtime colleague Janos Reisman building card towers just to get the perfect shot for them falling, all for the piece The Thousand-Year Reich. If he couldn't make the photo, he would turn to his photo archive, a newspaper clippings that lay strewn on top and underneath his work table. When that wasn't enough, he would venture to the photo agencies, hoping historical photos could work. But it wasn't just his extensive collection of images made his pieces striking visuals. Heartfield would also paint on pieces, blending each separate reality seamlessly together, and once done, the pieces would be immediately sent to the printers for eyes. Thanks to printing technology of the day, his pieces were easy to reproduce, perfect for spreading through the masses, a factor John Heartfield purposely utilized. It was his goal to create stunning visuals that wouldn't need any interpretation and could be understood with a look, a pictorial speech that would need no interpretation, as Hyrie Strub put it. He used juxtaposition, allusion, and idioms in his visuals and captions to form the narrative for his viewers. Heartfield wielded photo montage for the purpose of social protest, creating with striking simplicity and deep conviction. John Heartfield's dedication to exposing the corruption of the Nazi Party drove him to pioneer photo montage, creating images that still hold value, particularly in the political realities of today. He was born at the right time, to be the right age, to be well experienced just when his social counter commentary was needed. His life experiences and personality helped produce the artist who could perfectly comment on such dangerous times. Heartfield's art reminds us that we shouldn't let ourselves blindly believe those who are in power, but rather question the facts that we are told and that we can do something about it.